This story highlights the journey of an exceptional young black mathematician who faces prejudice and discrimination in an elite academic setting. Despite being underestimated and mistreated by her teacher, Melena Johnson demonstrates remarkable resilience and mathematical brilliance. Her story is one of perseverance, hidden genius, and the power of standing tall in the face of adversity. Don't miss this powerful story of brilliance, resilience, and transformation. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Melena Johnson clutched her schedule tightly as she navigated the pristine hallways of Westmont Preparatory Academy. The building smelled of polish and privilege, so different from her previous public school. Her scholarship was rare, only awarded to one student every 3 years, and the weight of that opportunity pressed down on her shoulders. "Excuse me," she said softly to a group of girls blocking the hallway. They glanced at her, taking in her simple clothes and natural hair, before shifting only slightly, forcing Melena to squeeze past. "Is she new?" "Probably diversity enrollment. I heard she's from the East Side." The whispers followed her like shadows as she searched for room 214, Advanced Mathematics with Ms. Valencia. Finding the room, Melena took a deep breath and straightened her posture before entering. Ms. Valencia was arranging papers at her desk. She was a middle-aged white woman with golden blonde hair streaked with white, her body neither thin nor fat but solidly built. When she looked up, her gaze swept over Melena with instant judgment. "Can I help you?" The question wasn't welcoming. "I'm Melena Johnson. I'm in your advanced mathematics class." Ms. Valencia's eyebrows lifted. "You're in advanced mathematics? Are you certain you have the right room?" Heat crept up Melena's neck. "Yes, ma'am. I scored a 5 on the AP Calculus exam at my previous school." The teacher's lips pursed as she consulted her roster. "I see. Well, take a seat in the back. We'll be reviewing concepts today that might be challenging for transfer students." As Melena moved toward an empty desk, she noticed several students exchanging glances. One boy whispered something that made those around him snicker. She kept her eyes forward, sliding into a seat near the back. "All right, class," Ms. Valencia began, her voice crisp with authority. "We'll be tackling differential equations this semester, building toward our participation in the Westmont University Mathematics competition. Only the most gifted students will be selected to represent our school." Her gaze deliberately skipped over Melena as she added, "Those with the proper preparation, of course." Later, in the guidance counselor's office, Melena sat stiffly as Mr. Phillips reviewed her file. "Your scores are impressive, Melena, but Westmont is different. Our standards are exceptionally high. Don't be discouraged if you find yourself struggling to keep up." Melena nodded politely, but inside, a quiet determination was building. They didn't know her yet, didn't know what she was capable of. And that was their mistake. "Grandma, they look at me like I don't belong there." Melena sat at the kitchen table, her homework spread before her, while her grandmother, Esther, prepared dinner. "Baby, people have been looking at us that way for generations," Esther said, her hands moving steadily as she chopped vegetables. "Your grandfather was the first black engineer at his company. They gave him the broom closet as an office. What did he do? He turned that closet into the most organized, efficient workspace in the building. Then he designed a bridge that's still standing 50 years later." Esther pointed her knife at Melena. "When people underestimate you, that's their error in judgment. Not your problem." Melena smiled, comforted by her grandmother's wisdom. After her parents' death in a car accident when she was 7, Esther had become her rock, her champion. The small house they shared was filled with books and love. From the living room shelf, Melena pulled down a worn notebook, her mathematical journal. Since she was 10, she'd been filling it with equations, proofs, and patterns that fascinated her. When anxiety or sadness overwhelmed her, numbers provided comfort. They were reliable, logical, beautiful in their precision. She remembered Ms. Gardner, her 8th grade math teacher, who had first recognized her talent. "Milena, this is extraordinary," Ms. Gardner had said, looking at Milena's solution to a problem the rest of the class had struggled with. "Have you considered accelerated mathematics?" That conversation had changed everything, leading to advanced placement and eventually this scholarship. Ms. Gardner had written her a recommendation letter so glowing that the Westmont Scholarship Committee couldn't ignore it. Milena opened her journal to a fresh page and began working through a series of differential equations, losing herself in the elegant dance of variables and constants. Her mind quieted as she worked, finding peace in the discipline of mathematics. "Solving equations again?" Esther asked, peering over her shoulder. "I don't understand a bit of it, but it sure is pretty the way you write it." Milena laughed. "It is pretty, isn't it? This one describes how things change over time, like how heat moves through an object or how populations grow. Like magic, but with numbers." Esther squeezed her shoulder. "You remember what your grandfather used to say?" Milena nodded, reciting the familiar words, "Excellence is the best response to prejudice." "That's right. Now come eat dinner. Even mathematicians need food." Later that night, Milena added new solutions to her journal, developing her own methods for solving complex problems. She didn't know it yet, but these personal techniques would soon be put to the ultimate test. "Ms. Johnson, perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts with the class, since you find our discussion so uninteresting?" Milena's head snapped up. She hadn't been daydreaming, she'd been mentally solving the equation Ms. Valencia had written on the board, which contained an error. I was just thinking about the equation, Ms. Valencia." "Really? Then by all means, enlighten us." Milena hesitated, then said quietly, "I think there might be a mistake in the second step. The derivative of the cosine function should be negative sign, not positive." A heavy silence fell over the classroom. Ms. Valencia's face tightened, her eyes narrowing as she studied the board. "Well, I was simply testing your attention." She erased the mistake quickly. "Though I doubt many of you would have caught that without proper calculators." A boy named Tyler snickered. "Or without spending Friday nights with math books instead of friends." Several students laughed. Ms. Valencia did nothing to stop them, instead moving on with her lesson as though Milena hadn't spoken. During group assignments, Milena found herself isolated. The students clustered together, purposefully turning their backs to her. "Don't mind them," a quiet voice said. A girl with auburn hair and glasses slid into the seat beside Milena. "I'm Zoe. Want to work together?" Relieved, Milena nodded. As they compared solutions, she noticed Zoe's methods were methodical and precise, though sometimes unnecessarily complicated. "That's a really interesting approach," Zoe said, looking at Milena's work. "I've never seen someone solve it that way." Before Milena could respond, Ms. Valencia's voice cut through their conversation. "Ms. Lawson, I assign groups to challenge you, not to have you carry weaker students." Zoe blushed. "Actually, Milena was showing me a different solution method. It's really elegant." Ms. Valencia took Milena's paper, studying it with skepticism. "This is unorthodox. While creative, Ms. Johnson, I prefer you follow the methods in our textbook. Novel approaches often lead to errors on exams." She placed the paper down and addressed the class. "For this weekend, I'm assigning a challenging problem set that will prepare you for our upcoming competition qualifiers." Her gaze settled coldly on Milena. "Some of you might find this exceptionally difficult. Feel free to do your best, but don't be discouraged if you can't complete it." As the bell rang and students gathered their things, Tyler deliberately bumped Milena's desk, sending her calculator clattering to the floor. "Oops," he said with mock concern, making no move to help. Milena bent to retrieve it, her face burning with humiliation and anger. As she straightened, she caught Ms. Valencia watching, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Zoe appeared at her side. "Just ignore them," she whispered. "They're afraid of anyone different." "Different? Or just black?" Milena asked quietly. Zoe had no answer. The back pain had started a week earlier, during Milena's third day at Westmont. She had arrived early to Ms. Valencia's class, carefully placing her books on a desk near the front, determined to be more visible, more engaged. Ms. Valencia entered shortly after, frowning at Milena's chosen seat. That desk is typically reserved for Tyler. He's one of our strongest students and prefers to sit up front. I'm sorry, I didn't know, Milena had replied, gathering her things. I can move. Yes, that would be best. As she had stood, pain shot through Milena's lower back, an old injury from track and field at her previous school, recently aggravated when she'd helped her grandmother move some furniture. She winced visibly. Is there a problem, Ms. Johnson? Ms. Valencia asked, her tone suggesting annoyance rather than concern. My back is just a little sore today. It might be better if I stand for class. Ms. Valencia's expression hardened. That won't be acceptable. It's disruptive. I have a doctor's note, Milena began, reaching for her backpack. It's a sports injury that, in this classroom, Ms. Johnson, we follow proper protocols. If you're claiming a medical exemption, that should have been registered with the nurse's office in advance, with proper documentation sent to all teachers. But sit down, please. The other students were arriving now, watching the exchange with curious eyes. Humiliated, Milena tried once more. Ms. Valencia, I really think standing would be better for my back today. Something flashed in the teacher's eyes, a moment of frustration or perhaps something darker. She stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Milena's shoulder, physically guiding her down into a chair. I said sit down. The pressure of her hand sent a jolt of pain down Milena's spine, causing her to gasp. Several students witnessed her sharp intake of breath, the momentary flash of tears in her eyes. Ms. Valencia, you're hurting her, one student had said uncertainly. The teacher immediately removed her hand, but the damage was done. For the entire period, Milena sat rigid with pain, unable to concentrate. After class, she had gone straight to the nurse, who documented the aggravated injury and provided a standing accommodation. The principal, reviewing the incident, had minimized it. I'm sure Ms. Valencia didn't intend to cause discomfort. She's one of our most experienced educators. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding about the severity of your condition. Now, a week later, Milena still stood during Ms. Valencia's class, her posture deliberately straight despite the teacher's disapproving glances. The official accommodation protected her, but it had also created a visible symbol of her difference, her resistance. After today's class, the school nurse checked on her again. How's the back feeling, Milena? Nurse Chen asked, gently testing Milena's range of motion. Better when I'm standing. Sitting for too long still causes pain. The nurse nodded sympathetically. The muscles need time to heal. Keep using the standing accommodation as needed. She lowered her voice. And don't let anyone make you feel bad about it. Your health comes first. As Milena left the nurse's office, she passed the principal in the hallway. His smile seemed forced. Ms. Johnson. Adjusting well to Westmont, I hope. Yes, sir, she answered politely, knowing it was what he wanted to hear. Good, good. We have high expectations here. Very high. He patted her shoulder awkwardly before continuing down the hall. Milena watched him go, thinking of all the things she hadn't said. About the whispers, the isolation, the teacher who seemed determined to see her fail. Instead, she straightened her spine, the physical pain now a reminder of her resolve. She would stand in that classroom every day if necessary, a quiet but visible act of persistence. The clock read 2:17 a.m. as Milena stared at the problem set Ms. Valencia had assigned. Most of the equations were challenging but solvable with the methods they'd learned in class. However, the final problem, worth a significant portion of the grade, seemed deliberately obscure. She rubbed her tired eyes, reaching for her fourth cup of tea. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and her grandmother's gentle snoring from the bedroom. Think, Milena, she whispered to herself. There's always a pattern. The problem involved a complex differential equation with boundary conditions that made traditional solutions unwieldy. She had tried the textbook methods, but they led to pages of calculations with opportunities for error at every step. Frustrated, she closed the textbook and opened her personal journal instead. For years, she had developed her own mathematical intuition here, exploring connections between different areas of mathematics. What if? She murmured, sketching a different approach. Rather than attacking the equation directly, she transformed it, reframing the problem entirely. The transformation simplified the equation dramatically, allowing for an elegant solution in just a few steps. Excitement building, she worked through her new approach, checking and rechecking her work. By 3:30 a.m., she had a solution that was both correct and beautiful in its simplicity. But doubt crept in. Would Ms. Valencia accept this method? It wasn't in the textbook. It wasn't even a standard approach taught at the undergraduate level. Milena? Her grandmother stood in the doorway, wrapped in a faded blue robe. Baby, it's almost 4 a.m. What are you doing up? Sorry, Grandma. I got caught up in this problem. She explained the challenge and her solution. Esther sat beside her, looking at the incomprehensible, to her, symbols spread across the pages. And you found a new way to solve it? I think so. But I'm not sure Ms. Valencia will accept it. It's not the method she taught. Is your answer correct? Yes, I'm certain it is. Then be proud of that. Esther squeezed her hand. Your mind works in beautiful ways, Milena. Don't dim your light to make others comfortable with their darkness. After her grandmother returned to bed, Milena took a photo of her solution and posted it anonymously to an advanced mathematics forum she frequented. By morning, she had several responses, including one from a moderator who was a mathematics professor. This solution method is remarkably elegant. It reminds me of techniques used in higher-level analysis. Whoever you are, you have a genuine talent for seeing mathematical connections. This approach would be worthy of publication in an undergraduate journal. Strengthened by this validation, Milena carefully copied her solution into her assignment, including detailed explanations of each step. If Ms. Valencia marked it wrong, she would have evidence that respected mathematicians found her approach valid. As she finally drifted to sleep, the equations danced behind her eyelids like old friends, reassuring her that in mathematics, at least, there was an objective truth that existed beyond prejudice or personal bias. Attention, everyone. Principal Harrington stood at the front of the assembly hall, beaming with administrative pride. As you know, Westmont Preparatory Academy has a long tradition of excellence in mathematics. Today, I'm pleased to announce the details of this year's Westmont University Mathematics Competition. Ms. Valencia stood nearby, her blonde-white hair pulled into a severe bun, a self-satisfied smile on her face as the principal continued. This prestigious event brings together the finest young mathematical minds in the state, with university scholarships awarded to the top performers. Our own Ms. Valencia will be selecting Westmont's team based on classroom performance and special qualifying assessments. From her seat in the middle of the auditorium, Milena listened intently. A university scholarship could change everything for her future. Additionally, the principal announced, we're honored to have Dr. Eleanor Wright, Distinguished Professor of Mathematics at State University, serving as our guest judge this year. Dr. Wright is renowned for her work in differential equations and dynamical systems. A murmur of excitement rippled through the students. Dr. Wright was a legend in mathematical circles, one of the few black women to hold an endowed chair position in a STEM field at a major university. After the assembly, Ms. Valencia gathered her advanced mathematics students. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, she announced, her eyes bright with anticipation. Based on your performance thus far, I've selected the following students for our competition team: Tyler Barnes, Zoe Lawson, David Chen, Elizabeth Murray, and Jason Patel. Milena's heart sank. Despite consistently correct homework and perfect quiz scores, she hadn't been chosen. Ms. Valencia, she said after the other students dispersed, I'd like to be considered for the team. My grades are among the highest in the class. The teacher's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Ms. Johnson, this competition requires more than just grades. It demands a sophisticated mathematical background and years of proper training. I'm making these selections based on what's best for the students and the school. But how can I prove myself if I'm not given the chance? Perhaps next year, after you've had more time to adapt to Westmont standards." Ms. Valencia gathered her papers dismissively. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to distribute the competition preparation materials to the team." Later that day, Milena overheard Tyler and another team member discussing the competition. "The final round is always some crazy differential equation," Tyler said. "Valencia says they're bringing in some famous professor this year to design it." "Dr. Wright, right? I heard she specializes in boundary value problems." "Yeah, exactly the stuff we've been prepping for. No way any other school stands a chance." Milena froze. Boundary value problems, exactly like the one she'd solved in the weekend assignment. The one where she'd developed her own elegant solution method. That evening, she researched Dr. Eleanor Wright, reading everything she could find about the mathematician's work. One paper particularly caught her attention: Novel Approaches to Boundary Value Problems in Differential Equations. The techniques described resonated deeply with the method Milena had independently discovered. She printed the paper, highlighting passages that paralleled her own thinking. For the first time, she felt a connection to the larger mathematical community, a sense that her intuitive approaches weren't just valid but potentially valuable. The next day, a university representative visited Westmont to discuss the competition logistics. Milena watched from a distance as Ms. Valencia charmed the visitor, speaking confidently about her team's preparation. "Our students have been rigorously trained in advanced techniques," she overheard Ms. Valencia say. "We believe in proper mathematical foundations, not just creative guesswork." The word stung, but Milena held on to what she knew: in mathematics, elegant solutions spoke for themselves, regardless of who discovered them. "I'm not even asking to be on the team anymore," Milena explained to the school counselor, Ms. Diaz. "I just want to attend the competition as an observer. It's open to all students, according to the flyer." Ms. Diaz reviewed the competition information. "You're right, Milena. Any student can attend the preliminary rounds as audience members. Ms. Valencia cannot prevent that. She told me it would be disruptive for non-team members to attend." The counselor frowned. "That's not accurate. I'll make sure your name is on the attendance list." At home that evening, Milena paced her small bedroom, anxiety and determination battling within her. "Grandma, what if I'm making a mistake? What if I go to this competition and embarrass myself?" Esther looked up from her knitting. "Let me tell you about your great-grandmother, Ida Mae Johnson. She was the first black woman to work as a human computer at Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory, before NASA even existed." "Really? You never told me that." "She calculated flight trajectories by hand during World War II. The white engineers would check her work over and over, expecting to find mistakes. Never did." Esther's needles clicked rhythmically. One day, a critical calculation was needed urgently. None of the white computers could solve it fast enough. Your great-grandmother stepped forward, even though she wasn't supposed to work on that classification of problem. What happened? She solved it. Right there, while everyone watched. After that, they gave her the hardest problems first. Esther set her knitting aside. Sometimes you have to show up in spaces where they don't expect you, just to remind them who you really are. That night, Zoe called unexpectedly. "Milena? It's Zoe from class. I wanted to apologize for not speaking up when Ms. Valencia excluded you from the team. It wasn't right. Thank you for saying that." A pause, then, "I have the team preparation materials. Would you like me to share them with you? Just so you can see what we're working on." Milena hesitated only briefly. "Yes, I would. Thank you." The next day, Zoe slipped her a folder during lunch. Inside were practice problems strikingly similar to the weekend assignment Milena had already conquered, plus additional materials on boundary value problems, exactly the type of mathematics where Malena's intuitive approach excelled. She spent the next week practicing intensively, refining her solution method and preparing for every possible variation of the problems. The competition was in 3 days, and though she wouldn't be competing officially, Malena was determined to be ready for whatever opportunity might arise. On the eve of the competition, she stood before her bedroom mirror, rehearsing the steps of her solution method as if explaining them to an audience. Her grandmother watched from the doorway. "You know, your grandfather would say you've already won," Esther commented. "How's that? You found your own path through the mathematics. That's victory enough." She straightened Malena's collar affectionately. "Everything else is just showing them what you already know about yourself." Malena smiled, feeling a calm certainty settle over her. Tomorrow, she would attend the competition, not as a spectator, but as a mathematician in her own right. Whatever happened, she would face it standing tall. The university auditorium buzzed with excitement as teams from 12 schools prepared for the final round of the Westmont University mathematics competition. Malena sat in the audience section, ignoring Ms. Valencia's glares from the coaches area. Dr. Eleanor Wright took the stage, commanding immediate respect with her elegant presence. In her mid-50s, with silver-streaked natural hair and keen eyes, she embodied scholarly dignity. "Welcome to the final round," she began. "Today's challenge will test not just your technical skills, but your mathematical creativity and insight." The university president introduced the distinguished panel of judges, 3 mathematics professors and Dr. Wright herself, who would oversee the final challenge problem. "Teams, you will have 30 minutes to solve the challenge equation once it's revealed," the president explained. "You may confer among yourselves, but only one team member may approach the blackboard to present your solution. Are you ready?" The Westmont team looked confident. Tyler whispered something that made the others laugh, casting a smug glance toward Malena. Dr. Wright unveiled the problem, a complex differential equation with multiple boundary conditions, precisely the type Malena had been studying independently. A murmur rippled through the teams as they assessed its difficulty. "Your time begins now," announced the timekeeper. For the next 20 minutes, Malena watched the teams huddled in intense discussion. The Westmont group initially appeared confident, with Ms. Valencia hovering nearby, offering occasional guidance. But as time passed, their expressions grew increasingly concerned. At the 25-minute mark, teams began sending representatives to separate blackboards around the auditorium. Most wrote partial solutions or attempted standard approaches that quickly became unwieldy. Tyler approached Westmont's assigned blackboard, chalk in hand, but hesitated. He returned to the team for further consultation, his face tense. Ms. Valencia's expression shifted from confidence to concern as she watched the other teams struggling equally. 5 minutes remaining, called the timekeeper. From her seat, Malena could see the fundamental issue. They were all attempting to solve the equation using standard methods that, while theoretically correct, were practically impossible to complete within the time constraint. The complexity was deliberate, requiring a more elegant approach, exactly the transformation method Malena had developed. With 3 minutes left, Tyler returned to the blackboard and began writing frantically, following the textbook approach. But his work grew increasingly chaotic as he realized he couldn't complete it in time. 2 minutes remaining. Even Dr. Wright looked surprised at the universal struggle. She exchanged glances with the other judges, who were nodding with what appeared to be satisfaction at the challenge level. Ms. Valencia's face had gone pale. This was supposed to be Westmont's moment of triumph, but her team was faltering just like the others. 1 minute remaining. A peculiar calm settled over Malena. Without fully deciding to move, she found herself standing, walking slowly toward the empty blackboard at the side of the stage, one reserved for the judges' demonstrations after the competition. "Ms. Johnson." Ms. Valencia hissed as she passed. "Return to your seat immediately." Malena continued forward, aware of the eyes turning toward her. The principal half rose from his seat, uncertain whether to intervene. Dr. Wright noticed the movement and watched with interest as Malena picked up a piece of chalk. "Young lady," one of the other judges began, that board is not for. Dr. Wright raised her hand, silencing him. Let's see what she has to offer. The timekeeper called, "Time's up. All solutions must be completed as they stand." But Milena had already begun to write. The auditorium fell silent as Milena's chalk moved across the blackboard with quiet confidence. Her posture was straight, her movements deliberate, as if she'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "This is outrageous," Ms. Valencia protested, moving toward the stage. "She's not even on our team." Principal Harrington grabbed her arm. "Valencia, wait. Let's not create a scene." Dr. Wright approached the blackboard where Milena worked, observing with increasing interest. The other judges gathered behind her, their expressions shifting from annoyance to curiosity. In the audience, students whispered, and the competing teams watched with a mixture of confusion and fascination. Zoe gave Milena an encouraging nod from the Westmont team table. The transformation Milena applied to the equation was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than attacking the problem directly, she reframed it, revealing a hidden structure that made the solution almost self-evident. It was mathematics as art, concise, beautiful, profound. Ms. Valencia pushed past the principal, marching toward the stage. "This is completely inappropriate. Ms. Johnson is disrupting the competition. She has no authorization to participate." Dr. Wright turned, her voice measured but firm. "I authorized her to proceed, Ms. Valencia. As head judge, that is my prerogative. But she's not on our team. I specifically did not select her because she lacks the proper training and background for this level of mathematics." The words hung in the air, revealing more than Ms. Valencia had perhaps intended. Dr. Wright's eyebrow arched. "Is that so?" She turned back to watch Milena, who continued writing, seemingly oblivious to the drama unfolding around her. The final line of Milena's solution appeared on the board, followed by a simple box drawn around the answer, a mathematician's traditional way of declaring completion. She set down the chalk and stepped back, her expression calm but her hands trembling slightly. Dr. Wright studied the board silently, tracing the steps with her eyes. The three other judges huddled behind her, murmuring among themselves, occasionally pointing to different parts of the solution. Finally, Dr. Wright turned to the audience. "Would the young mathematician who just provided this solution please introduce herself?" Milena's voice was soft but clear. "Milena Johnson, Westmont Preparatory Academy." "Ms. Johnson, can you explain your approach?" Taking a deep breath, Milena turned to face the audience. Her eyes briefly met her grandmother's in the back row, drawing strength from Esther's proud smile. The standard approach to this boundary value problem would require extensive computation, she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Instead, I applied a transformation that reveals the underlying symmetry, allowing for a more direct solution path." She proceeded to explain each step, her explanation as elegant as her mathematics. As she spoke, recognition dawned on Dr. Wright's face. "This transformation," the distinguished mathematician interrupted, "is remarkably similar to techniques recently explored in current research. How did you develop this approach, Ms. Johnson?" Milena hesitated only briefly. "I've always seen patterns in mathematics that others might miss. When traditional methods become too cumbersome, I look for hidden structures that might simplify the problem." "Self-taught?" Dr. Wright asked. "Largely, yes. I've had wonderful teachers who encouraged my interest, but this particular approach I developed while working through problems in my personal mathematical journal." In the audience, Ms. Valencia's face had drained of color. The principal looked stunned, his gaze shifting between Milena, the solution on the board, and the visibly impressed judges. Dr. Wright turned to the other judges, who nodded in unanimous agreement before she addressed the audience again. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we've witnessed today is extraordinary. While our competition rules require that official recognition go to registered team members only, I would be remiss not to acknowledge the exceptional solution we've just seen." She gestured toward Milena. "This young woman has demonstrated not only technical proficiency but the kind of creative mathematical thinking that advances our field. Her approach to this problem reflects an intuitive understanding that cannot be taught, only nurtured. The auditorium erupted in applause, led enthusiastically by Esther Johnson, who had risen to her feet, tears streaming unashamedly down her face. The solution Ms. Johnson has provided, Dr. Wright continued, addressing the captivated audience, represents a level of mathematical insight rarely seen even among undergraduate mathematics majors. She turned to the blackboard, pointing to specific elements of Malena's work. This transformation technique effectively reduces a complex boundary value problem to a form that reveals its fundamental structure. It's not merely correct, it's illuminating. The other judges nodded in agreement, one of them whispering, reminiscent of Fourier's approach to heat equations. Dr. Wright smiled. Indeed. In the front row, Ms. Valencia's face had cycled through shock, disbelief, and now settled into a rigid mask that barely concealed her humiliation. The principal beside her looked equally stunned, but with a growing recognition of the situation's implications. For those following along, Dr. Wright continued, notice how Ms. Johnson identified this hidden symmetry that none of our competing teams detected. This insight reduces 20 minutes of calculation to 5 elegant steps. She turned to Malena. How long have you been developing this approach? About 3 weeks, Malena answered honestly. I encountered a similar problem in a homework assignment and found the standard methods unnecessarily complicated. Ms. Valencia flinched visibly. Several people in the audience connected the dots, glancing between the teacher and her overlooked student. From the Westmont team table, Zoe spoke up unexpectedly. Malena tried to show an alternative solution method in class, but was told to stick to the textbook approach. Tyler, surprisingly, nodded in reluctant agreement. She does math differently. Not wrong, just different. Dr. Wright's eyebrows rose. Different approaches are the lifeblood of mathematical progress, young man. Every significant advance in our field came from someone who thought differently. She turned back to Malena. Have you documented your method development? Yes, Dr. Wright. I keep a mathematical journal where I work through problems and develop my own approaches. I'd very much like to see that journal, with your permission. As the judges conferred quietly, the university president stepped forward. While we determine the official competition results, I'd like to invite all participants and audience members to a reception in the adjacent hall. The crowd began to move, buzzing with excitement and speculation. Malena found herself surrounded by students from various schools, all eager to discuss her solution. How did you see that transformation? One asked. Could this approach work for other types of equations? Questioned another. Before she could answer, she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. It was Esther, her eyes shining with unshed tears and fierce pride. That's my granddaughter, she announced to anyone within earshot. Always standing tall when it matters most. Across the room, Ms. Valencia stood alone, her usual circle of admiring colleagues notably absent. For the first time since Malena had known her, the teacher looked small, diminished by the truth that had been revealed in equations and chalk dust on a university blackboard. The principal approached them cautiously. Ms. Johnson, Malena, that was quite unexpected. Yes, sir, she replied simply. I think we need to have a conversation about your placement at Westmont when we return to school. His voice had lost its usual condescension, replaced by something approaching respect. There may be more appropriate advanced opportunities for someone with your unique abilities. Esther's grip tightened protectively on Malena's shoulder. My granddaughter has demonstrated where she belongs today, Mr. Harrington. I trust the school will recognize that going forward. Before he could respond, Dr. Wright joined them, extending her hand to Esther. Mrs. Johnson. I'm Eleanor Wright. Your granddaughter has a remarkable mathematical mind. She gets that from her grandfather, Esther said proudly. He always said numbers tell their own truth if you're patient enough to listen. Dr. Wright smiled warmly. Wise words. And clearly, Malena has been listening very carefully. She turned to Malena. I'd like to discuss some opportunities with you, if you're interested. We have a summer research program for exceptional young mathematicians at the university. As they talked, Milena noticed Ms. Valencia slipping quietly out a side door, her usual confident posture replaced by defeated shoulders and hurried steps. For a moment, Milena felt a twinge of sympathy for the teacher who had so thoroughly underestimated her. But then she turned back to Dr. Wright, to her grandmother, to the future suddenly opening before her, bright with possibilities that had been there all along, waiting only for someone to see them clearly. Monday morning arrived with a different atmosphere at Westmont Preparatory Academy. As Milena walked the hallways, she noticed the changed glances, not whispers of diversity enrollment, but murmurs of the math genius and did you hear what happened at the competition? Advanced mathematics class had been temporarily reassigned to Mr. Collins, a retired professor who occasionally substituted at the school. Ms. Valencia, according to official communication, was on leave for personal reasons. The truth, circulating unofficially among students and faculty alike, was more complicated. After Saturday's competition, several parents had contacted the school board questioning Ms. Valencia's teaching methods and student selection criteria. The university had sent a formal letter praising Milena's mathematical insight while delicately suggesting that Westmont review its advanced placement procedures. Principal Harrington had called Milena and her grandmother for a Sunday meeting, where his tone had shifted dramatically from his previous condescension. "We want to ensure Milena's talents are properly nurtured," he had said, without quite acknowledging the school's failure to do so until now. Dr. Wright has offered to personally mentor her through an accelerated mathematics track. Today, as Mr. Collins called the class to order, he gestured for Milena to come forward. "Ms. Johnson, I believe you have a unique perspective on the boundary value problems we'll be discussing this week. Would you be willing to demonstrate your approach to the class?" Surprised but pleased, Milena nodded and moved to the front of the room. As she began explaining her transformation method, she noticed the changed expressions of her classmates, genuine interest replacing dismissal, respect replacing disdain. After class, Tyler approached her awkwardly. "That was pretty impressive, what you did at the competition." His usual arrogance had deflated considerably. "I tried for hours afterwards to reproduce your solution and couldn't get it." "I could show you," Milena offered, surprising herself with the generosity. "Yeah," he said, nodding slowly. "I'd actually like that." Later that day, Milena was called to the principal's office, where she found Dr. Wright waiting alongside a university admissions officer. "Milena, we'd like to discuss a special opportunity," Dr. Wright began. "The university has a dual enrollment program for exceptionally gifted students. It would allow you to take advanced mathematics courses at the university while completing your Westmont graduation requirements." The admissions officer nodded enthusiastically. "Based on what we witnessed at the competition, you're exactly the kind of student we designed this program for. We'd also like to offer you early consideration for our presidential scholarship." As they outlined the details, Milena thought of her grandfather, who had turned a broom closet office into a space where architectural brilliance could flourish. She thought of her grandmother, who had worked double shifts to ensure Milena had every educational opportunity. She thought of Ms. Gardner, the first teacher who had truly seen her potential. "I'm honored," she said when they finished. "But I have one request." "Yes." Dr. Wright leaned forward. "I'd like to establish a mathematics mentoring program at Westmont. For students who might think differently, who might not fit the traditional model of what a math person looks like." Dr. Wright smiled. "I think that could be arranged as part of your university service requirement. In fact, I'd be happy to serve as faculty advisor for such a program." That evening, as Milena shared the news with her grandmother, the phone rang. Esther answered, her expression shifting from curiosity to surprise as she handed the phone to Milena. "It's Ms. Valencia," she whispered. Hesitantly, Milena took the receiver. "Hello." The voice on the other end was subdued, lacking its usual sharp edge. "Ms. Johnson, Milena. I owe you an apology." Milena waited, unsure how to respond. "I made assumptions about you, about your abilities, your background, your potential. I was wrong." The teacher's voice cracked slightly. "The truth is, your approach to that problem was beyond my own understanding. I couldn't have solved it that way. The admission clearly cost her, but she continued, I've spent the weekend reflecting on why I responded to you the way I did. What I saw in you that threatened me so much. And what did you find? Milena asked quietly. That I've been teaching mathematics as a set of rules to be followed, not as a living discipline where creativity matters. And that I've been carrying biases I didn't want to acknowledge. A deep breath. I'm taking a sabbatical next semester to reevaluate my approach to teaching. But before I go, I wanted you to know that I recognize the harm I caused, and I'm truly sorry. After they hung up, Esther looked at her expectantly. Well? She apologized, Milena said, still processing the conversation. I think she might actually have meant it. Esther nodded slowly. People can surprise you sometimes, for worse, but also for better. The important thing is that you showed up, stood tall, and let your light shine. Everything else is just the world adjusting to your brightness. 3 months later, Milena stood at the front of a classroom in Westmont's Science Building, surrounded by a diverse group of middle school students from the surrounding community. Charts and mathematical models decorated the walls, alongside inspirational quotes from mathematicians of color throughout history. Mathematics isn't about following procedures, she explained, guiding them through a problem-solving exercise. It's about finding patterns, making connections, seeing the world through a different lens. The Westmont Mathematics Mentorship Program had quickly become more successful than anyone anticipated. Under Dr. Wright's guidance and with university student volunteers, Milena had created a space where young people who might otherwise never see themselves as math people could explore the subject without judgment or preconceptions. Zoe, now a close friend, assisted with the Saturday sessions. They really look up to you, she commented as they packed up after class. Especially the girls. You've changed how they see themselves. Through the open door, Milena spotted a familiar figure hesitating in the hallway. Ms. Valencia had returned from her sabbatical 2 weeks earlier, quieter and more thoughtful than before. She'd requested to observe the mentorship program but hadn't yet found the courage to attend. Ms. Valencia, Milena called, surprising herself. Would you like to come in? The teacher entered cautiously, her eyes taking in the classroom environment, so different from her own rigid approach to teaching. This is impressive, she admitted, studying the student work displayed on the walls. You've created something special here. Thank you, Milena replied. We're focusing on multiple solution paths, encouraging students to develop their own approaches. I've been studying alternative teaching methods during my sabbatical, Ms. Valencia offered hesitantly. I've had to unlearn a lot of my own training. It's been challenging. Growth usually is, Milena responded with a small smile. Ms. Valencia nodded, then asked tentatively, would there be room for another volunteer? I have a lot to learn, but perhaps I could contribute something as well. Before Milena could answer, the door burst open and Esther entered, carrying a large cake decorated with mathematical symbols. Celebration time, she announced. My granddaughter just received her early acceptance letter to the university honors program, with a full scholarship. The room erupted in cheers. As congratulations flowed around her, Milena found herself standing beside Ms. Valencia. I'm glad for you, the teacher said quietly. Truly. Thank you. Milena paused, then added, and yes, we could use another volunteer. Especially someone who's open to new perspectives. Later that evening, as Milena and her grandmother walked home beneath a star-filled sky, Esther squeezed her hand. Your grandfather used to say that mathematics is the language of the universe, she reflected. But you've shown it can also be the language of change. Milena looked up at the constellations, thinking of patterns and connections, of equations and transformations. Of standing tall when it mattered most. The formula was always there, she said softly. I just had to find my own way to solve it. Above them, the stars continued their ancient mathematical dance, constant and yet ever-changing, like truth itself, waiting patiently to be discovered by those brave enough to look beyond what they've been taught to see. Dear friend, Milena's story reminds us that brilliance comes in all forms and from all backgrounds. Too often, talent goes unrecognized because it doesn't fit preconceived notions of what excellence should look like or where it should come from. Her journey teaches us that sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice is simply to stand tall and demonstrate your capabilities, even when others attempt to diminish you. In classrooms, workplaces, and communities everywhere, there are countless individuals like Milena whose gifts are waiting to be acknowledged and celebrated. May this story inspire us all to look beyond our biases and recognize the extraordinary potential in every person, regardless of how they look or where they come from.